Okay, Marissa, this is the week of October 9th through the 13th, I believe. So here's what we're doing. We are going to try write equations of lines. I'm going to give you a line, and you're going to try to write the equation. Here's what we're doing. Well, I'm trying to move this. There we go. Okay. So what we're doing is this. I give you a line. This is what I did. This is what I did on Monday. I would give all the students a line, and I would go through the y-axis, right here, the y-axis, at a number. I'm going to say it's 4. Okay? And this line would go through some point, and I'm just going to say, there's your point. And what you need to do on your worksheet is pick out what we call the y-intercept and the slope. Now, when you write your equation, it's going to look like this. Y equals mx plus b. Okay? Where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. So when you're looking at your line, you want to start looking for where it crosses the y-axis. So since it crosses at 4, we know b is 4, okay? Okay, and then we have to look for the slope. And the slope is the hard part because you have to count your rise over your run. So when you count rise over run, you always pick the y-intercept right here. But then you have to go down the line until you find where the line crosses the corner of a box. And you're going to have to do that yourself, and it's got to hit dead center of the corner. Now, this is really hard because this graph paper is it's hard to see this. But if I pick these 2 points right here and I count the slope is simply going to be this. Start at any point you want, and I'll start here on the bottom, and I'm just going to climb, 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 and that's my rise. So I went up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I went up 6, but then I turned the corner and I went left 1, 2, 3, 4. So basically I went left 4 and up 6. But when you talk about rise and run can be positive and negative. Okay, so since you went up 6, it's positive 6. And since you went backwards 4, right here, you went left 4, left happens to be negative. So your slope is 6 over negative 4, or you could just reduce it to negative 3 over 2, which is the same thing. And because it's positive divided by negative, we're going to call it negative. And you will always know if your slope is negative if your line goes down, that's negative. That's a negative slope. And a line that goes up, like this, happens to be a positive slope. So right away when you look at your lines, you'll know if they're negative, you'll know if they're positive. And when you read a line, you always read a line coming in from the left side. This one's going up. Coming from the left side, this one's going down. So that's why that's negative, and that's why going up is positive. Okay? Now, once you know this and you know this, you just come back here and you plop them in. Y equals negative 3 over 2 is the slope. Always multiply it by x. And then add the y-intercept 4. Okay? So that's how you do the entire worksheet, just like that. And you just have to keep counting the slope. The slope is the hard part. The y-intercept is usually very easy. Now, if for some reason you have this look right here, I'm going to erase this. Okay. Well, that didn't work. Okay. Oh, that's not working. Okay. Okay, so if you have this look, and what I'm saying is if you have a line cutting through 0, 0, and it goes off maybe through that point. Well, then there's your line, okay? And now you have to say the b value is 0, and the slope to this line is, count your rise, you went up 3, count your run, you went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. So now, rise over run, in this case, the slope is rise 3, run 6, or better yet, 1/2. Okay, and the y-intercept is 0. So to write that equation, you'd say y equals, the slope is in front of x, and then you don't have to do this. You don't have to write plus 0, but you could, and it wouldn't be wrong. So here's the better look. Just write 1/2 times x. And there you go. There are two special lines. The special lines would be this one. When you get x equals a number, like 5, or you get, another special one is when you get x equals a number like 3. Okay? Those are special lines, and they'll be like this. Anytime you get x equals a number, like this, you have to think it's one of the two special lines, either vertical or horizontal. The way I like to think of it is, if you look at this one right here, if you look here, x equals 5 will always cross the x-axis at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the only way to cross the x-axis is to cross it vertically. So this is x equals 5. Okay? Now, this one right here, this one is the other special equation. It says y equals 3. Well, this one I think y equals 3 has to cross the y-axis at what? 3. And it's going to cross it horizontally. Okay? So any horizontal line has y equals the number, where any vertical line has x equals the number. The way I told the students to remember this is, if you take the variable x and you shave off the bottom, now you see a V, and a V stands for vertical lines. The way I told them to remember this one, right here, is I said take the y and turn it upside down, and if you turn it upside down, the y looks like an H. H for horizontal. Okay? So if you ever get confused and you see y equals 3, turn the y upside down and you got an H, which tells me draw a horizontal line through 3. Okay? So there are your lines, how to write equations to them. Hopefully that helped. Okay? Now, the next day, which was actually today, Tuesday, today we did something like this. We took the equations and we actually graphed them, but today they were not solved for y, so we couldn't just graph them. So if I take that equation and I want to graph it, your goal is to simply get it to look like slope-intercept. Now, slope-intercept is always solved for y. So if you can solve it for y, you can graph it pretty quick. So looking at this equation right here, you need to solve for y. So this is called the y term. You must isolate the y term. Okay? Now to isolate it, you need to get the x term off this side. So because you see 2y plus x, the only way to get rid of addition, the opposite of adding x, is to subtract x. So now, you got to get on the other side and subtract x. So then that x minus this x cancels out. All you have left is 2y equals, and I always try to put the x term first, 6, the constant second. 6 is called the constant. I always put it second. Next, you want to get rid of the multiplication part. Well, to get rid of it, you got to do the opposite of multiplying, which is division. But what you divide on the left side, you must divide on the right side. So 2 divided by 2 makes 1, 1y. Now, over here on the right side, you've got this number in front of x, it's 1. So what happens is now you have negative 1x over 2 plus 6 divided by 2 is 3. And now this is now solved for y, which means it's now in slope-intercept form, which now means we can graph it pretty quick. Okay, and this is what we did last week. So this was the easy part for the students today. I asked them what was the y-intercept, and they said 3. Okay, they picked this number, the number all by itself. Then I said, what's the slope? And they told me right here, the number in front of x, negative 1/2. Okay, so they said start at 3. Put your starting point there. Okay? And then from there, it's rise over run. And then they looked and they went, negative 1 means down 1. And positive 2 on the bottom means to the right 2. So down 1, right 2. So I go down 1, right 2. Down 1, right 2. Down 1, right 2. So this line would cross at 6, I believe. Okay? So all of these equations, not all of them, but most of them were not solved for y. So you had to keep solving for y on Tuesday's assignment. And I think tomorrow, Wednesday, is kind of a repeat of what we did today. So I think you should be able to handle the assignment tomorrow. I got to tell you this, but today you had a worksheet that said 1 through 20 all, and it was solved for y. Okay. Not only did I asked the students to solve for y, but I also said please graph certain problems, and the problems were 3, 6, 9, 9, 9, 9, and then I don't remember the other 3, so let me go look that up. Okay. 3, 6, 9, and then I told them to graph number 14, number, I believe, number 19 and number 20. Okay, and where do you put this? Where do you put these 6 problems? Can you put this on the back side of the other worksheet? And on the other worksheet, there was a side that had just tables. They were making you graph using tables. Well, I said don't do any of those and just use the 6 grids for these 6 problems, okay? Okay, and this was coming off the worksheet that was 1 through 20 all, okay? But you know, if you can't figure out what I just said, then don't worry about it. But I mean, this is just good practice, okay? All right. Really quick, if I look at, I'm just going to look at one of your problems on this worksheet 1 through 20. If I was to look at number 17, okay, this is 17 off your worksheet. It says 3x take away 5y equals 24. Okay, so there's your problem, and it does say solve it for y. So solving for y, you would need to get this y term all by itself. You know, and you start by moving the x term over here with the 24. So you go minus 3x. So you just, whatever you want to get on the other side, it's always add it or subtract it. Well, in this case, this is positive 3x, so we'll go minus 3x. Minus 3x. Out with 3x, all you have left is negative 5y equals, I always put the x term first, then I put the constant last, okay? And then you just look at it and you say, what do I do to both sides? Well, you want to knock off the multiplication. To get rid of multiplication, you divide. But you cannot just divide by 5 because, yeah, that would cancel the 5's out, but now you have negative y. So always divide by the number you're multiplying by. Negative 5 divided by negative 5 makes positive 1y. But what you do to one side, you must do to the other side. So divide this side by negative 5. Divide everything by negative 5. Okay, so this becomes 3/5 x positive because negative over negative is positive. This becomes negative, and then this does not go in there very well. So it's 24/5. Okay? And that's why I did not make you graph this, because 24/5 is not fun to graph. It's not a very good number, so it's hard to find it on the graph paper. Okay? But this is your answer. You just want y all by itself. This is in slope-intercept form. If I did ask you what's the slope, I hope you would tell me 3/5. If I asked you the y-intercept, I hope you'd say 24/5 negative. And this is why this little tiny negative, I'm sorry, it wasn't the negative, it's the fraction, 24/5. This would not be fun to graph because really this number is 4 4/5 negative. So this is why I chose not to graph this kind of problem. I hope this helps you with Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. That'd be October 9th, 10th, and 11th. Good luck. Talk to you soon.